Okay.
Hi guys.
Okay, so how do we want to start this? Do we want to just share? Someone wants to start with interesting fact?
Sure. I can talk about my girl.
Go for it.
Sharma, she was a 5th grade student from Punjabi, India, which is cool. I got assigned her. And so she speaks Punjabi, and I'm guessing also that she speaks Hindi, and then her parents speak English, and she's learning English. It said that she thrives socially and picks up on a lot of idioms and English terms, but then in the classroom she doesn't want to really acknowledge a lot of her Indian culture, and there's other Indian students there too, but she will only go to them if she has to. And so I think one of the factors or concerns is that she would lose her cultural identity and being Punjabi, and so I think as a teacher you want to encourage her to say, it's great that you are who you are, you don't have to be just like everyone else in the classroom. And what else? So her parents speaking fluent English and being middle class and really being involved in her education are really optimal. Not a lot of ELL. I feel that's a really optimal situation for an ELL student. And also another question that was raised was that most of the students who were ELL in the classroom were Spanish language learners, or that Spanish was their first language. And is this okay?
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Okay. And so I guess as a teacher, it'd be interesting to try to find resources for one student who has a totally different first language than all of your other ELL learners. And so trying to find resources or interpreters or books or different things like that would be harder to find that in Punjabi than Spanish. And also she's Sikh, which is something that I know a little bit about, but I feel it's not a very well-known religion in a lot of ways, and so that might be something to look into if you're a teacher, to be
read up on
and be wait, I don't want to assign anything, or be a little more careful of what you're saying if it might disrespect them in some way. But I thought it was really interesting. It was interesting for me too, because some of my good friends in India were Sikh, and they were from Punjab, and I traveled there, and so it was felt like I know her. But also another thing is that she speaks Punjabi fluently, but she doesn't write it or read it very fluently, and so that might be another thing to try to help her with. But
does she write and read
in English, but not really in Punjabi? And so I don't know how I'd help her with that, but if we're talking about language retention.
Yeah.
That's Sharma.
That was kind of similar to Farah's situation. She's the one who, she was from Iraq, and her family was really well off, and her parents spoke English. And then when she moved to Texas, of all places, which I feel she didn't have very many people of her own culture there. She didn't have any support, and she only spoke a little bit of English, and her brother was in kindergarten, so he was picking up English really easily, and then her parents were really busy trying to find jobs and were stressed out, and even though they spoke fluent English, she wasn't getting that support, and their teacher wasn't fully prepared to handle her situation, and couldn't provide support for her language, because it was just Spanish, similar to her situation.
Yeah.
And she said in Farah's thing, she's learning more Spanish in her ELL class than English, because most of the ELL students were Spanish.
That's interesting.
But it would make that, you can see that happening all the
Oh,
time,
yeah.
because if you don't have a translator or someone educated to help students like that, then they're gonna fall through the cracks. impacts, even though she was really well educated back in her home country.
It's interesting
Mm-hmm.
that like her like high level education and her parents like socioeconomic status still doesn't mean that she's gonna like it's gonna be really easy.
Yeah, and she really struggled to connect with anybody. Yeah, I think what the outlook for her is that she just has really low self-esteem. And so my question for that was, as a teacher, I would want to incorporate her in the classroom, but I would want to be really sensitive to not, I feel like if you were to do something that would put her too much on the spot or make her uncomfortable, you'd lose all her trust, because she's already pretty low self-esteem. So as a teacher, you just have to be really aware of that.
How old is she?
She was in 4th grade, I believe.
Yeah, one of mine was this little girl named Lonnie, who's from Cambodia, and she was just going into kindergarten, so she was really young, but she didn't really know any English. She couldn't read or write in her native language, and so I guess she went to this big public school where she was around a bunch of other ELL students, but she was always just very quiet in English or in her native language. I think there were 1 or 2 other students who spoke it at her school, but she just I don't know, kind of seemed like she shut down. But then after a while of being at that school, she was transferred to another school where she was in a much smaller class. And I guess her teacher from the original school went and visited her at that school to just check in and do the case study. And she had opened up and was talking and had way more proficient in English than anybody, or than her original teacher had kind of thought she was. I don't know. So
She just felt overwhelmed.
yeah, I
in
think
class.
yeah, and the analysis part after her case study, it said that a lot of ELL students go through silent periods. And so while she was at this big school, she was just kind of trying to sit back and absorb everything, because of the different culture, different language, different everything. And then when she was in a smaller class and had more kind of individual attention, I think that is what really made her feel more comfortable and be able to be more successful, I guess.
It's really interesting. The silent period.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting as well. It makes sense. It totally makes sense, but I never really thought about it.
I'd be overwhelmed.
Totally.
Totally.
Because you want to make sure that they were in the classroom as much as possible to learn the content, but if that's too overwhelming and they're not picking up anything, it's because they don't know the language, that's kind of creepy. Everybody's looking around. Then they're not gonna, you want to make sure there's a balance, I guess.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the same when we're in our special ed class too. How much do you want to pull out? How much do you want to make sure that of course you want to make sure that there's tons of classroom involvement.
I think it's cool how everything's related. It's kind of like in child psychology, you're talking about the zone of proximal development. And with that, it's how much do you want to include Farah? Is that her name?
Yeah.
And how much do you want to include her and make sure she's not too self-conscious and give her tasks and how much can she achieve, and then for this too, it's is she still absorbing, or can I ask her questions? It's interesting.
Yeah, the question that brought up, Lonnie's case brought up for me was as a teacher, if you have an ELL student who's in a silent period and you kind of recognize that, how do you kind of respect the fact that they're this is a phase that they need to go through and support them in that, but also really trying to encourage them to practice English and to develop relationships and stuff.
One thing, I had some speech problems when I was in elementary school, and I was kind of scared to talk in front of people, but my speech therapist, she would record some of the things that I need to do in practice, and I'd go to the speech class, but really quiet, and she'd record it, and then I'd take it home. And
record you talking,
or record what I need to do,
oh,
this,
okay.
this, and then I would go and practice when I was home, and so maybe I don't know, maybe you could do that as a teacher too.
Because in Farah's case, she was super, she wanted to learn and she would spend a lot of time outside of school studying, but she wasn't receiving as much support as she needed at home.
Yeah.
And I think that's the case for a lot of
Yeah.
all students of all classes and backgrounds. You don't
Yeah.
always have that kind of support at home.
Seemed a lot like Tao. I don't know how to pronounce that. T-O-U.
Yeah.
He was a
Tao's really
Hmong
good.
student, and he went to
Oh, what?
a Hmong, H-M-O-N-G.
Okay.
He went to a junior high school, and he spoke English well, but he tested below, like, the 50th percentile in all of his academics and stuff. And he wasn't generally liked. He looked different than the other students.
Mhm.
A lot of racial slurs were aimed at him. And he was also the youngest of 7 other kids in his family that had
Jeez.
moved here. And like his dad was able, like they got a translator or something, and his dad was able to communicate with the teacher and what they could do to support him to get him through 7th grade, which they did. But when they got him to 8th grade, it was like it became apparent that he had joined a gang and like dropped out of school and transferred to a continuation school. And so like without that support and like moving into this
Yeah.
place where you're picked on and you like are trying in academics but you can't, that happens.
Yeah.
8th grade.
Sad. In one of my questions, or not one of my questions, but for the third task, I had to look at Ogbu's theory. Did you guys read that at all?
Will you explain that later?
Yeah, so he separated it into immigrant minorities and involuntary minorities. So in immigrant minorities, they're the ones that aren't really influenced by mainstream society because they already have a set cultural values of their home country, and they have a strong family group. And so they can switch easily between their home life and their home culture, and then acting, I guess, being in the elementary school classroom, they can switch between the two, even though they're extremely different. But involuntary minorities, they're people who don't really have a set culture or have been in America for many generations, or it was kind of confusing because everybody's so different, so it's very hard to classify one person
As one thing.
or as the other. But I guess the examples I used was Eugenia. She was the other girl that I wrote the summary on. She was successfully alternating her behavior between her American schooling and her Mexican culture at home. But then Tao, he was an involuntary minority because he has a missing sense of belonging. Because people who are involuntary minorities, they don't have that secure first culture. So they're constantly searching to find belonging in their new culture, and that's often reached by people who are really accepting, which is like drug communities, gang communities. And it's really interesting because I don't think you should, what I believe about this is that you should definitely keep this in mind to anticipate where your students, what directions they might go in, but also to know that, classification is not.
You can't just classify and be like, well,
Yeah.
here's what's gonna happen to you.
Yeah, but in a lot of these cases, you can kind of see, I think it was in your case where she's worried about losing her first culture, like you don't know which direction she's gonna go if she's not fully supported, so it's kind of interesting.
I also, one of the things that I need to talk about was the student failure or not to failure, like the personal failure. I'm not sure what it was called again. But there are a lot of people who are like, of course they're gonna do this because they're from this culture, and making this big wide blanket statement for the culture, and then be like, oh, of course they'll be late or turn this in late because they're
Cultural deficit.
Yeah. Yeah, and so it's like, just because a student is from one place doesn't mean that they're going to, they're gonna have all of these factors that we, I don't know how to say this. Stereotypes, yeah. Just, they're not gonna, be a living example of every stereotype, and that's something to really think about. And that you have to really consider, like you were saying, that each kid has a different path, and you can be like, yeah, this might be where they are, but I'm not gonna set them in this category and think that they can't get out of it.
I want to talk about one of the questions that I have from my other case study, there was this boy going into middle school, and he was from Somalia, a Muslim refugee from Somalia, but he spent most of his life in a refugee camp, and then came to the U.S. His parents can't speak English, no money, so he has never had any experience with formal education. Osman, that's what his name is. And so now he's just in this like 6th or 7th grade class, I guess, and doesn't speak English, has no like anything in any subject area, and just I don't really, I guess, know enough about how those students, like, when they come into the American school system, like, what do we do? Like, what's there for them?
Yeah.
Like, do they get special ed support? Like, do they have an IEP? Like, I just didn't know. Do you guys know any, like, how the system would handle
That's
that?
a really good
I
question.
bet it like depends on the resources the school has,
Yeah.
or like the the resources the school and the school district has, which is too bad. I hope that all
Yeah,
they probably are like ELL supports.
yeah.
But like for a student who's a refugee, like I don't know if there's like governmental things for like helping refugees, or I have no idea.
Because I mean, it wouldn't be just ELL support, like, you'd think they'd need a lot of
Yeah.
support.
He needs support in literally everything.
Yeah.
He's like also learning to navigate a new culture, a new language, like a new climate, environment. Like,
Yeah, I
I
mean,
need counseling, like definitely.
but you can see if there's, especially in a really underfunded school, where is that gonna come from, right? Or if you're in a community where nobody could relate to him in that way.
Yeah.
I mean, and he's really isolated.
I don't know, it just made me really like sad.
A lot of these are really sad.
Really sad. I was reading, I was like, oh my god.
Cause like imagine being the teacher of his class, you know, and he's your new student. I would just be like, you know.
That's where I feel like it doesn't matter as long as you're caring and patient and kind. I feel like that can go a really long way.
You can't expect to like be like everything for every kid. You
Yeah.
just do your best.
There's some kids that you won't be able to reach as well as others, especially with that barrier.
I think one like overarching theme for a lot of these is like if a kid feels isolated or is isolated, then that's like that's like a kind of chain reaction where he's gonna
Yeah,
if you feel isolated, then you're not gonna have social support, and social support is where you learn a lot of language anyways, or like where you're gonna want to achieve in school because of a network of social like friends and things like that, or if you feel isolated with your teacher or back home if they're busy, like, but it's sad. It would help all of them.
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, what are you gonna say?
Well, I was just talking about that. It seems like, yeah, social support, like finding a community, supportive community, and how much money your family has
Yeah.
seem like the
Yeah.
two big ones, you know? I would say social support probably over economic factors.
I worry a lot about, this is kind of tying into the next article, changing demographics, and it kind of was just like, yeah, it's a lot of middle-class white women who don't know a lot.
Yeah.
It's true, I mean, our class, when you look at it,
I
there's
mean,
a
the
lot
four
of-
of us.
Yeah, so I just know that I have a lot of passion for this, and I want to be as supportive as I can, but I mean, every culture is so different. I just worry that I'm gonna be one of those teachers that won't be able to provide the right support or.
Well, I think the fact that you're thinking about it and have that
Yeah.
worry means that you're gonna be like really good. I don't know. I feel like a lot of teachers who end up being like really detrimental are the ones that are like, oh no, I'm fine. And I know just as much as I need to know about everything.
The more we learn in these classes, the more I realize that I don't. How does that saying go? The more I know, the more
you realize you don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, same. And it's kind of like, yeah, I'm very white, and
Yep.
I wish sometimes there could be like all these different cultures and then
Yeah.
I can understand people.
I guess like just having more experiences with different different students.
Yeah.
I mean, you've had an incredible experience.
Yeah.
And that'll totally help you in it if you end up getting into an ELL class. I mean, you already have, but yeah, I think it's going to be extremely scary getting a new student that you just don't know how to communicate with. I mean, if they're completely illiterate in their first language and know no English, I don't know what that would be like.
I guess also it's just like you don't know a lot about them and where they're coming from, but they don't know a lot about where you're coming from. And so I feel like as a teacher, if you're like kind of express that, like we can like mutually learn about each other,
Yeah.
then that's like a really good way to set up a classroom. I've had teachers in the past who've done that. You just feel like you're like growing together instead of just kind of like, I don't know, this very separated class.
That's a good point. Did anybody else have anything about the second chapter that they wanted to bring up?
I think all the social cultural rights are really important, like the freedom from prejudice and discrimination, learning about and from others, and developing a more universal vision of reality. I think the third one is something that I was just kind of talking about, but like because everyone's reality and like past experiences are different, and then in a classroom if you try to like create something that's a little more of a common ground for everyone to work on, and to like grow from that, then I think that's really important.
Yeah, I like learning about all these theories and stuff, but I'm super interested in like the actual practical things, like especially for the second article, like closing the academic gap. Yes, we need to do that, but I want to know like how exactly what steps.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. It's like, yes, this is a great theory.
Yeah.
Please help me learn
Support
how to
it.
I am not opposed to this at all.
Yeah, and even from the little things, like what games can I play with my ELL students to help build trust between the two of us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that will just come through research and experience as well.
I feel like it would be really good though if they were like telling us about this and they also told us like
Tell us what we can do.
direct like application.
Well, I think that's probably coming, right?
Yeah.
So, because I like things spelled out. Like, here's what you do.
Yeah.
These are what you can do.
This happens a lot. That happens a lot in 432. But I just want to like, do it. I want to see what it's like, and I guess I just need to find a volunteer opportunity where I can.
Yeah.
Well, anything else that we should add on to this? How many minutes are we at?
Uh-oh.
Oh, I have another thing if we want to add on.
Okay.
I constantly think about when that lady came from Shuxon, talked about what she was doing with her ELL students, but and then I also read this other book about this, it's called Educating Esme or something, it's a super good book, it's about this girl's first year teaching, and it's really good, but she has some parents that just don't care. They don't care about education, or that they don't have the means to spend any time working with their kids because they're so busy working 2 jobs.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you need that, they need that support at home, your students do. So how do you bring that in? How do you, then you think of like Matilda where she like goes to the house and is like, she's a bright student, you need to be supportive, but what are some ways that we could, or if you guys have any personal experience or know of how teachers brought in parents other than parent-teacher conferences?
All I can think of was the principal and the translators and stuff.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah.
I guess we don't have to answer it
Off
now.
the top of my head. That's something we can talk about next week.
Yeah.
Or in our
I'd like to
discussion
look into
post.
this. Oh yeah, the discussion post.
It's a really good point though. I think it's funny those movies, there's a lot of teacher movies where they like go to the kids' houses and
Yeah.
they like do this stuff and I'm like, is this okay?
Yeah.
What's the movie? It's like Dangerous Mind or no, I don't. It's just like she's like a very inspirational high school teacher and it's like
Oh, is it the one with
she's a girl.
Yeah, wow.
Anyway, she like goes to all their houses and like takes them out to dinner, and, like all these things. And, like,
Yeah, I don't know if
I was like, that's a great idea in theory, but then there's like those boundaries.
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
you're not supposed to cross.
It's definitely like a very worthwhile question. I just don't.
I guess you could find out like, you could like, I think group work sometimes is really good in classrooms, and also if it's like if they're kids who like might not get that much support from their parents, they can like find it from each other. They like live close by to each other.
Oh, that's true.
But yeah, I don't know about a lot of like how to get parents involved if they're like working 3 jobs. It's like, well,
Maybe you just can't.
maybe you just can't. Just adopt them all.
Solution.
All right, are we good?
Yeah, I think we're good.